Hey guys, Nicolette here with Insomnicat. Today, Bryan and I are going to talk to Bob Zubrickie. He is the manager of 3D printing and prototyping over at TE Connectivity. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about how the company started this process. I mean, 3D printing over 30 years ago, that's pretty awesome. And he'll have some samples of some of the awesome things that they've created. Hint, there's a 3D printed motorcycle. And he'll also have some advice for those of us, those businesses who are just getting started in 3D printing and really want to incorporate it into their production processes. So stay tuned. Hi guys, I'm Nicolette Emmino, and today Bryan, DeLuca, and I are here with Bob Zubrickie. He is the manager of 3D printing and prototyping at TE Connectivity, and he's going to talk to us today about all things 3D printing. So, hi Bob, can you tell us a little bit about yourself for those of us who don't know you?
Sure, absolutely. I'm a little bit of a unique individual. I can pretty much do anything, very diversified, whether it's automotive, building construction, 3D printing, mechanical engineering. So I got a very, very diverse background. Within TE Connectivity, I came to the company 40 years ago, and I got involved into the prototyping and model making of connectors. Back then, there was no such thing as a computer. And then around 1987 is when 3D printing came out. In 1989, I took a lot of interest in it, got involved into it. So I've been doing 3D printing for about 30 years now. Today, I got a big team working for me, a very diverse group of engineers and technicians. Within TE, we do tens of thousands of prints, per year. So, it's a very skilled, highly skilled type of technology to be involved in. And in today's society, I manage all that.
So you've been called a 3D printing guru, and which I think is a really cool title. So, I mean, how did you get that?
Well, it's very interesting, and that's why I mentioned about being so diverse in the background, is that when people call me a 3D printing guru, not only did I start out with 3D printing from the very beginning of its invention, but I've been totally involved in it and engulfed in it, and have a passion about 3D printing through the past 30 years. So, when people want to know anything about 3D printing, they can come and talk to me, whether it's the behind the scenes software, connections, the actual 3D printing itself. 3D printing is a very diverse type of a technology out there. And of course, we also call that additive manufacturing.
So let's talk a little bit about TE and its 3D printing center, which you manage. So the company introduced 3D printing, what was it, over 30 years ago, right? And you've developed some pretty cool prototypes since then. What do you consider to be some of the most groundbreaking that have come out of the center?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that question, because I just happen to have with me one of the things that we 3D printed. It was a 3D printed motorcycle. And we did that back in 2000.
Can you put that up again, Bob? Can I see that one more time?
Sure.
That's pretty cool, Bob.
How much of that is 3D printed?
So it's functional, it's operational. Majority of all the components on it are 3D printed. It is an electric motorcycle. We do have it in the Guinness Book of World Records. We do hold approximately 7+ patents on it. So if you want to see more about this, just do, a web search on 3D printed motorcycle, and you'll see TE's a 3D printed motorcycle in the article behind it.
That's
wow, that's so cool.
So that was one. I have another one for you. Another thing that we did was a 14-foot Pearl Tower for Shanghai. So this was just given to our facility in Shanghai at our corporate center in 2018 to represent this Pearl Tower. And we've been in China for 30 years in 2018. So we gave it to them as a monumental gift. And we built this 14-foot tall Pearl Tower, which was kind of cool.
wow. So I'm assuming that tower, obviously the motorcycle, but the tower you printed in components and then assembled them?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
How long does just out of curiosity, how long did that take?
To do something like that took us about 2.5 months. And we did most of that kind of work on our downtime, because we have to stay focused
in our spare time.
And then, yeah, evenings, weekends, holidays, that's when we'll come in and do something a little bit fun, and it's very rewarding to get your fingers in on things like that.
Right. Well, how long were you guys working on the motorcycle, actually?
The motorcycle, that took us approximately 8 months to do, and that was fully engineered from the ground up and built. It took 3 different of our machines in order to do that,
Mhm.
and countless number of build hours and engineering, but it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
That is pretty cool. But I want to talk a little bit more about this 30 years. So, I mean, 1987, it seems like a pretty early time to start incorporating 3D printing into a business, at least in this capacity, right? And so T got in on that. How does that, how did that happen for the company, and how did they start? How has that evolved for T?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that, because it's always the inspiration of a lot of times our leaders. And we had management at that time that went to Detroit. They had an AutoFact conference. And at this conference, there had this company that was going to roll out this 3D printing technology. And they were looking for companies to get involved in it. And there was no such thing as 3D printing before that. So this individual, his name was Tom Kirstensteiner, worked for our company, and he's seen the vision that this could be a good possibility of helping out a model shop on getting prototypes. So we got involved in the beta testing. We were one of 5 companies that got involved in beta testing in the very beginning. We beta tested the technology, we invested in it, got multiple machines in various regions within our company. In 2000, or actually 1989 is when I created my department as a service, and I seen that this was going to be a definite value for the company moving forward in not just prototyping, but just getting first article pieces in people's hands so they get a good feel of what a part looked like. Prior to that, all you had was computer images or paper images, and you really didn't have much of a prototype unless you cut and paste and machine something up, which was very labor intensive.
So how have you seen it evolve over the last 30 years, right? There's different additives now that you could use, and you have all these different, right, structures. What have you seen over those 30 years? Like, what has changed?
Wow. That's a great question to ask somebody like me, because my expectations are so high. Where 3D printing additive manufacturing is today, I really expected it to be at this level back in the mid 1990s.
Right.
So it was a cultural thing that, from the beginning, we really did not have a good way of implementing it and getting it into our culture until the 2000s, when the majority of the public seen this as, a viable source of producing something. And that's when it really took off. So, when you look at 3D printing has a history of peaks and valleys on the successes. Today, if you look at 3D printing, this is just the beginning. We're into a new era. There's a lot of innovation going on. There's a lot of buy-in from corporate America that's taken off with it. It is definitely going to change the way we produce things in the future. Absolutely.
So when I think of connectivity, right, I think of T connectivity, its name, I don't think of 3D printing. So how is 3D printing implemented into, connectivity technology and next gen electronics and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, when you think about 3D printing within connectivity, there's a lot of ways of looking at it, not just the connector itself, but also the encasement that the connections or the wire harness may be in, your packaging of your connectivity in a lot of ways. So that's going to be basically your low-hanging fruit. The thing that the consumer sees is what's going to be the outside packaging before you go inside. You're going to see a lot more functionality happen. It's going to come out of 3D printed parts for connectivity. If you think about pulling your wire outlet, out of the wall, and you're going to unplug something, you may have a difficult way of pulling that out because it's molded in a certain manner. It would be nice if that was ergonomic, that when you grab onto it, it matches your fingers, and you would give it a pull and it just grabs onto your hand and you don't have to squeeze as much. So things like that is where you're going to see connectivity change, more individualism, more changes within the design that it's going to be more personalized for the person.
I like that. I never thought of that, actually. So heavy question, loaded question. What is some advice that you have that you've gained over the course of your experience for those who are kind of just getting into this technology in this setting, in a business setting, in a corporate setting, not for the DIYers, but those who are implementing it, what kind of challenges are out there? How do you overcome them? What do you got for them?
Again, a very, very good question. And it's one that I run into a lot. And the thing is, when we look at 3D printing, additive manufacturing, don't stereotype it. Don't stereotype it on something you've seen that may be a negative. You think 3D printing may be a small printer on your desk at home, and it might take forever to print something. And when you look at the industrial stages of 3D printing, today we can 3D print metal parts, which is just as good as a machine part and just as durable and just as tough. So when we talk about 3D printing in the industrial stage, it's going to be more expensive. It's going to be higher buy-in. And if somebody's going to get started into it, definitely look at your innovation first. Think about your product design. You don't necessarily have to design your product to be manufacturable. You can design your product however you might think of it in your mind. Then you 3D print it, and then you look at your throughput and decide, is this going to be something that's going to be a 3D printed type of process, for manufacturability, or are you going to go into manufacturing to where you're going to look at throughput and cost reduction in order to, profit what you're going to do. But I think generally what we need to look at, and the advice I give people is, try it, be involved, pay attention to it. It's happening very fast. The acronyms are all over the place. It's very confusing, but the more you're involved, the more you understand, and it's going to change the culture of our manufacturing in the future, and everybody should be involved in one way or another, or at least knowledgeable.
So you mentioned designing, right? In there. So how has that also changed with 3D printing over the course of the last 30 years? Actually designing your components or designing whatever project it is. How has that changed with the advent of 3D printing?
Yeah, great one. And design changes are happening right now today more than I've ever seen in the last 30 years. If you think about a connector and think about how many components may be with a connector, connectors made up of many components, just like a lot of things in the world are made up of many components that are assembled. With 3D printing, you don't have to do that. You can 3D print it as one part, and then you eliminate a lot of the assembly process, which again will reduce a lot of the cost. And that's why moving into the future, we're going to see a lot more of this additive manufacturing, 3D printing type of a process happening. When you look at the actual design of 3D printing, I get a lot of interns that will shadow me, come into the company here and work with me. And it's always great to see young minds that have never touched a machine tool in their life do designs that normally when you see a design from somebody like that, it's not manufacturable, but to actually produce the part is very engaging. So when we look at design for 3D printing, it's just beginning. The whole new generation is coming up that's going to change the way we evolve and the way we manufacture. And so there's going to be a pretty cool things coming in the near future.
So it seems like you're almost saying it takes away some of the limitations that were previously.
I was just going to add, you just took the words right out of me. I was going to say, so the advice is really don't limit yourself then, because you don't have to work backwards anymore. Now you can actually work forwards. No, you're not limited. Yep, you read my mind.
Yeah,
Wow.
For sure.
So what else, Bob? What else should if we're talking to, let's say, engineers, if we're talking to businesses, recently we published an article on eDesignIt about the truth about 3D printing in a business setting, and some companies think they want to implement it, but they're not realistic. They don't have the for example, the designers on staff, they have to work, different things that come up. So if you had to speak to these people, what else should they think about? What else are we missing?
Yeah, I think the main thing that people really need to look at, especially if you're looking at the industrial age and the commercial age out there, you really look at the materials themselves that are coming off of these 3D printers, and they're not exactly where they need to be today, but they're getting closer. And if you think you're going to go out and get a 3D printer and start producing things immediately, We may not be there 100% yet, but it's getting there. So you really need to do your research on the materials and what your engineering needs are of that 3D printed part before you make that step. And before you make the investment, and you're going to do an investment at a large scale, and sometimes it's very hard to justify the payback on some of these large end, corporate type 3D industrial 3D printers. Go to the service bureau. There's a lot of service bureaus out there that'll run parts for you, get the parts, look at them, analyze them, break them, see what's really going to work for you, and ask a lot of questions about the technology and the materials. And once you find something that fits, that works for you, focus on that technology and really research that technology. Because if you took one particular type of a technology within 3D printing, there's a ton of different manufacturers out there, and you really want to see what the manufacturers have to offer for whatever you would like to produce.
Are they really that different? I mean, when you're looking at all the manufacturers, is it just cost? Is it efficiency? What are the variations there when you're looking at so many manufacturers?
Yeah, a lot of the variations can fall just in materials. Some manufacturers of 3D printing, you have to buy all the materials from them. Other 3D printers, they're totally open architecture, so you can pretty much use any material you find, anywhere that's being sold in the world. So you really got to find, what material works for you, and if the part itself does not have a good quality look to it, you got to find out why. Why is the quality not there? Is it the resolution? Is it the the recipe or the parameter sets they use to run the machine, or is it the individual? Sometimes a person can either make or break a technology. So when you get we'll call it a bad looking or bad functioning 3D printed part, just try again. Look around and see what else is available, in order to, get what your needs are.
And that's what you've been doing for the past 30 years, right? So obviously it works.
Yeah,
it's working.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it seems like you guys are doing some really, really cool things over there. And if you print any more bikes, please send us some photos. We would love to see what that process looks like. Send us a motorcycle, actually.
Yeah.
But we wanted to thank you for taking some time to talk to us about TE and the prototyping lab, and talk to us about 3D printing. And we just really appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely. You're doing some amazing work over there.
Yes. And if anybody wants more information, you can go to te.com. There's a wealth of information about our connectors, connectivity, and you can find even articles on a 3D printed motorcycle there. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Bob.
Bob.